Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, and as I've been mentioning a little bit, if you follow me on the videos I put up on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have some exciting news that at long last, a Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th Edition campaign, a full campaign, is going to be coming to the channel. So, in light of that, I wanted to go ahead and make a video kind of exploring the characters, the player characters, and the kind of starting information for the campaign. That way, if you want to tune in and watch it, you're not confused as to who is who and like what's going on in the onset. Now, I'm not going to be revealing any spoilery information just in case the players happen to tune in to this, but I'll give you enough so that if you're watching, you can follow along. But it'll be put up on the channel. I'm really excited to showcase it. The first session is later this week, I think. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So the first player character I'm going to go over is our Wood Elf, whose name is Verve, and she is played by Cold. So obviously that's not his real name, but that's the name we're going to call him. So Cold's character Verve is a wood elf that was born and raised in the kingdom of Athaloran known as Widrioth, or the Pine Crags. And she essentially grew up in a family that was not super noble per se, in that they weren't like high-class wood elves, but they were certainly not the drugs of Wood Elf society either, which, granted, compared to human society, being a dreg of Wood Elf society isn't so bad. Her father was one of the legendary Warhawk riders that come from Widrioth and are what they're particularly famous for. And she has two siblings. One is Donil the warrior, and then Ershan, who ended up becoming a healer. Her father, however, did pass away later in life, to a thing we'll get to. She's fairly young for an elf. She's only a little over a century old. But you'll get to see her character, and when we get into the first session, everyone will kind of describe their character and stuff, so we're just going to focus on backgrounds here. But what's kind of unique about her character is she's a wizard class to start off, so she's an apprentice wizard right now. And Cold is designing her to focus on heaven's magic because she has a very intimate relationship with lightning. Basically, she has this unfortunate but exciting misfortune of being struck by lightning multiple times in her life, which has scarred her numerous times, but she's survived it each time, and now she kind of has a innate fascination and bond with lightning, and it's kind of been present with her throughout her life. So she has some quirks that have been designed into her character to basically make sense with this, because I love to help people design their characters so that they're really, really interesting and fit a narrative that the player is designing. So Cold basically designed this character who has a morbid fascination with lightning and storms after being struck too many times and almost seems to yearn for it. So I gave him a personality quirk called Storm Chaser. And basically what it means is that whenever he interacts with something that can cause lightning, whether it's magic, storms, or some kind of technology, he will basically have a strong compulsion to put himself in a position to get struck by lightning, but he also gets bonuses whenever interacting with lightning. So it's kind of a positive or negative depending on things. But ultimately, he grew up in Widrioth and was struck a few times, though there was a very notable event in his life when he was in a glade, which are where the forest spirits live in Widrioth. And when he was about to be struck by a fatal piece of lightning, because he was just kind of out in the open, he ended up being saved by a tree man. And this tree man also had a habit of getting hit by lightning, so it was kind of a kindred spirit. And she developed a relationship with the dryads and tree men of that glade, and she ended up doing what she could to save him when very not too long ago, before her story truly began, a dragon ogre who was drawn to the glade by all the lightning strikes basically invaded the glade and started a battle with the tree man in winter when they're at their weakest. and she ended up playing a pivotal role in his survival, though her father died in the process. Not too long after that event, she got a taste of the old wanderlust that many young wood elves suffer from, and she saw a big storm on the horizon and followed it. And after following it for some time, she eventually met up with one of the other party members named Verstat that we'll go over in a little bit, and arrived very recently in the imperial city of Jettenberg. So that's kind of the basics of what you need to know about Verve. You'll learn more about her as we play through the campaign. Once again, she's played by Cold, and I look forward to you learning more about a character. So let's go ahead and move on to Verstat. The next character we'll be going over is another wizard in the party, but this time a human bright wizard who goes by the name of Verstat. So Verstat is a apprentice wizard, just like Verve is, and he is played by a player that we're going to call Aztec. So Cold plays the elf, Aztec plays Verstat, the human bright wizard. He is a much simpler story. He's a fairly young man, but he basically grew up in the Reikland and has spent his entire life in the Reikland. He's only about 20 years old, but he grew up in a small fishing village where his life was fairly uneventful. When he was born, his mother did die, unfortunately giving birth to him, which is actually something him and Verve have in common, is both Verve's mother and Verstat's mother were killed at their births. I think Verve's mother was struck by lightning, and Verstat's mother just died giving birth. And because of that, his father always kind of had a slightly negative view towards him, and wasn't very openly emotional with him, because he seemed to kind of blame his son for the death of his wife. But in any event, his life was fairly normal up until when he was a child. He was out on a fishing venture, and a monster, or a particularly nasty fish, basically came up from beneath the depths of the Reik, which is huge. Like the Reik can get, which is the main river going through Reikland, can get so wide you can't even see the other side. It's almost like a lake that just kind of keeps going. But a fish creature came up and attacked a boat he was on, and that's when his magic manifested for the first time, which burned the creature and saved everyone on board. But of course, since he just cast magic in the middle of a bunch of people who thought he was normal, they all declared he was a witch and prepared to burn him. But his father, in a bizarre and rare act of mercy, went ahead and saved him and gave him enough money to flee. So he fled to Altdorf, where he was enrolled in the Bright College, or the College of Fire, and there he studied under a magister named Toledo. However, despite having made it to the Bright College, it is very, very expensive to get your magical license, especially when your magic takes a while to manifest. So although he grew up in the Bright College for the remainder of his years for a good while, unfortunately, there was a change of authority in the Bright College. And previously, he had basically gotten by essentially being a glorified janitor. But when a new figure took over, the Bright Wizard who took over did not look favorably upon charity, and found Verstat to not be... He didn't like Verstat, and basically expelled him from the college, because the newest man who took over the Bright College essentially wanted everyone to, pay up and keep the college financially happy. But in any event, once he was pushed out, he basically was in a catch-22, because if you're not in the colleges and you don't have a license, then you're an illegal wizard. And if anyone discovers that, they will either burn you at the stake, or if it's a witch hunter, they'll probably do even worse things to you before burning you at the stake for being a heretic and a witch and all that stuff. However, he was kind of saved by a friend of his named Borgar, who was also a bright wizard in training, who introduced Verstat to a man named Knowles. Now, Knowles is a very mysterious dealer of bizarre trinkets who lived in Altdorf at the time, and kind of has a sinister promise with all of his items, which is that you can request something from him, and he seems to almost eerily always be able to produce it, whatever the item that you desire is, and he never accepts payment. Instead, he always gives an ominous promise that you will pay for the item with interest later on. So Verstadt, not having any money, saw this as a golden opportunity to get a forgery of a certification from the colleges of magic. So he's running around with this forged certification, making him a legal wizard, a license essentially, and so far it's stood up to all testimony or all scrutiny. That being said, beyond that, Verstadt is essentially someone who is just trying to make money. He still owes a lot of money to the College of Magic, and will have to go back to face that music sooner or later. He still needs to finish his tuition there to get a real license, and of course he has to be afraid that at any moment someone could figure out he has a fake license, which would get him in so much unbelievable trouble that he would be dead for sure, but leading up to his death would probably be horrible. His kind of quirk is that he's basically terrified of he's basically a student in the United States, in that he has a lot of debt in college and is terrified of debt and is trying to find a way out of it while also avoiding falling behind or getting caught and imprisoned. So he basically has a notable and understandable fear of religious authority figures like witch hunters, and also is very, very, very adverse to anything that puts him in further debt, because he views debt as almost like a sin. Not like in a religious sense, but in a you should avoid it at all costs because it's not worth it. So anyway, that's Verstadt the Bright Wizard. He did run into Verve when the two of them met on a boat that was heading to the city of Jettenberg. So they've already met for a little bit. They've known each other only for a few days, though. So we will be checking in on them in the first session, but we've got 2 more characters to go, so let's keep moving. The third character we'll be looking at, who is played by Ben, is the halfling named Wrist Fumblefoot, who, like many halflings, comes from a massive family clan. However, unlike all of the other characters in this starting narrative, he actually was born and raised fairly close to Jettenberg. He grew up in the much larger city of Bogenhofen, which is just down the river. He essentially he's a halfling in all the best ways. He's got a little bit of an askew moral compass when it comes to bribery, and his sense of etiquette is probably not the best. Halflings do tend to be a little vulgar in every possible way. However, they are very friendly creatures, and although not exceedingly dangerous in a physical sense, they can be dangerous when it comes to manipulation or to playing off the expectations of others. But he grew up in a fairly large family clan, like I said, the Fumblefoots, and they're essentially he grew up in a family that focused more on the cooking aspect of halfling culture. However, there is a ton of gangs in Bogenhofen. Bogenhofen is one of the wealthiest cities in all of the Empire, because pretty much all of the commerce from the Grey Mountains and notable part of Bretonnian things, anything south of Bogenhofen to get to Altdorf has to go through Bogenhofen. So they tend to pinch a little money off everything, and it's one of the wealthiest cities, but they have a ridiculous organized crime problem. And being a halfling, he was significantly involved in that. There were a ton of gangs that he was a little bit involved in, and he ended up going into work as being a guard. That being said, he didn't have a super eventful life until he got old enough that he ran into a little bit of a schism with some of the gangs, many of which are halfling gangs, or at least have notable halfling components, because like I said, halflings may not be dangerous when it comes to a sword fight, but they are very, very dangerous when it comes to manipulating others and having pretty intense societal relationships and builds. But in any event, he basically had a incident where, due to some shenanigans, he crossed some, if not multiple, of the gangs within Bogenhofen, and he was basically just buying out time until he was going to be sent to swim with the fishes, so to speak. So he decided to use what connections he could to basically get a somewhat false, and by somewhat I mean extremely false, letter of recommendation to work as a guard in Jettenberg. Unfortunately, the guard network in Jettenberg does not really see the value in halflings, because halflings tend not to make the best guards due to their small stature and lackluster strength, even though they are very keen-eyed and can be incredibly stealthy. But unfortunately for him, the guards kind of saw through his ruse and don't really value him. So he's going to have to look for work elsewhere. And in the city of Jettenberg, which he was trying to get into as a job anywhere, he will be meeting up with Verve and Verdstadt as they ride into town to answer a letter of sorts, a summons essentially, that was kind of like there are posters that I'll show you guys here at the end of the video that were sent out to all corners of the Reikland, advertising to try and get people to come work for the company that everyone's going to be employed by at the start of the adventure. And so maybe that's where our little halfling friend is going to end up in his efforts to run away from Bogenhofen and make sure that his deeds of the past don't catch up with him and end up getting him shanked in a dark back alley. But that wraps up Wrist Bumblefoot, so we're on to the final player character. The last character we'll be looking at is played by Phoenix, who you may know as a moderator on my Discord or in the live streams if you've ever been around there. But he is going to be playing a Norscan dwarf named Drak Frostaxe, I think it is. Yes. And he, of course, is named for the hold he was born in, Krakadrak. And basically his history is pretty straightforward compared to the other three, in that he was born and raised in the Norscan dwarf lands around Krakadrak and the minor holds of that area, but he was born and about when Thorgrim arrived after the Great War against Chaos and the battle at Kislev. When Thorgrim went north with the Norscan dwarves he met there, and as part of his right to become High King, he reestablished relations with the Norscan dwarves, met them, learned about their culture, and reconnected them with the World's Edge Mountains and the Karazankor in general. So, Drak Frostaxe essentially is he is the son of a Thane who basically has a family that's done very, very well for itself. And when Thorgrim returned home to become High King, he went home with the Norscan dwarves and a bunch of other treasures and nonsense to make forth his petition to become High King, because they basically had a king's meet where all of the dwarves showed up, and anyone who wanted to be High King had the ability to present their case and their deeds. And so High King Thorgrim showed up with the Norscan dwarves in tow, and one of them was Drak Frostaxe, who was not at the Battle of the Gates of Kislev. I should say he was born and raised to the extent that he has, because he's only, how old? He's only 96, so he's very, very, very young. But he was very young when Thorgrim arrived and left with a series of envoys, and he was one of the Norscan dwarves that went with that party back to Karazakarak. And he basically stayed there for a while until the time came for him to explore the world and learn more about the lands to the south of the Norscan holds, especially about the men of the Empire, because Norscan dwarves had typically only dealt with Kislevites and Norskins, who are a completely different breed and are very, very different people than you find in the south. So he has started to explore the realms, and he's going to be encountering much of the Empire for the first time, including his first wood elf being Verve, and we'll get to see how that relationship works, especially when Verve and Verkstad are wizards, which for Norscan dwarves is usually not a good sign, because the only wizards they typically dealt with were Norscan shamans, seers, and chaos sorcerers. That's about it. Maybe the occasional Kislevite Ice Witch. But that's pretty much all there is to say about him. He has taken up the role of a ranger, essentially, who, because he learned a little bit about ranger culture and all of that when he was in Karasakarak to prepare him for his journey. And now he's just sort of wandering around, learning about the world and learning information that he can take back with him to Krakadrak to help the hold continue to flourish and bring back all sorts of information and, of course, accomplish his own feats and earn his own name like many dwarves are wont to do. But that is going to wrap up the player characters. All of them will be meeting in the city of Jettenberg, and let's go into why they're there. So I'll go ahead and read off this letter, and you'll be able to infer everything you need to know, but TLDR, everyone's being hired by this mysterious and curiously worded letter sent by the Silverwood Lumbering Company. But here's what the letter says. To all seeking employ, the esteemed and reputable Silverwood Lumbering Company is seeking to hire any and all individuals looking to earn coin, lodging, or compensation for their efforts in the town of Hagerdorf. The Silverwood Company is seeking any and all forms of workers, including the likes of soldiers, laborers, and especially those who aren't easily swayed by superstitious rumors and legends of mythical beasts. Those of magical skill are also welcome, as their talents are of great use, though note it is required to report immediately to Sir Otto Silverhand once arriving in the jurisdiction of Hagerdorf to avoid potential witch burning or execution. The Silverwood Company is also open to employ any foreign individuals from outside the Reich, including any traveling dwarves, elves, and halflings, so long as they're willing to sign binding legal contracts to submit to the authority of the Silverwood Lumbering Company. Any of the Fey folk, or wood elves, not from Ulthuan, will, however, need to apply for inspection to Sir Otto Silverhand immediately upon arriving. To any interested in employment, please arrive in the township of Jettenberg and request travel at the Pickled Troll Inn. Do not attempt to travel to Hagerdorf alone under any circumstances. Payment and compensation will be negotiated upon hiring. Long live the Emperor and Prince Karl Franz, Praise Sigmar. Signed, the Council of Hagerdorf and the Silverwood Company. So the only thing I'm going to add before you're able to watch the first episode and jump into the adventure is that the first part of the campaign will take place in a town I have created called Hagerdorf, which is a village, a glorified village that the Silverwood Lumbering Company has set up in so that they can harvest the forests found in the Hagercrybs, which I will have a map of the Reikland up here so that you can see it. And the Hagercrybs are these big old mountains in the Reikland that have a pretty mysterious and sinister history to them. Typically, to the south of the Hagercrybs, there are a ton of mining operations that go into the foothills and the mountains themselves, but they're notably south of where this adventure is going to be taking place. This adventure focuses mostly on the forest areas that are up in the high slopes. So our party will be starting off in the river town of Jettenberg, and they will need to basically find a way to travel down a long, winding, and very rarely traveled road that leads them through the forests of the Reichwald, up into the steeps of the Hagercrybs, and then find their way to the village of Hagerdorf, where their adventure will begin in earnest. So, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you guys are all excited to see it. Feel free to ask questions or posit theories or anything like that down in the comment section below. I'm really hoping to have this be a fun experience both for the players and the viewers. So I hope you're all looking forward to it, and I know I'm really looking forward to it. So see you guys for the first episode, hopefully at the start of next week, or maybe this weekend. We'll see how it goes. In any event, thank you all for watching. Bye.